time for some Good Morning Fantasy. Week 12 is going to be behind us after this afternoon's Ravens-Steelers matchup, but it's time to find out who's going to get in your lineup for your Fantasy Week 13. We're taking questions over at GMFB, hashtag Which Guy Wednesday. Anything stick out to you, Schrags?
Yeah, look, I got this tweet that we saw on the show to you, and it's from Natasha Gibson.
Okay.
Who asks an important question. Aaron Rodgers or Kyler Murray? Because right now, Kay, I'll be honest, the whole world is upside down in the NFL with everything, but playoffs are on the way, and this is the most important week of fantasy. Rodgers or Kyler, if you got both of them, you're lucky. Who'd you take?
It's so funny to think, I was thinking, who has this problem between these two quarterbacks? But Schrags, Aaron Rodgers was drafted late. He was drafted maybe as your backup quarterback, and he is now a top 5 fantasy scorer at the QB position. I'm not showing you rankings this week because we haven't played the game that was today yet, so we don't have those scores or those rankings at NFL.com. This is the number 1 and the number 4 fantasy quarterback squaring off in this Which Guy Wednesday. I'm going to take you to Splitsville on this one because we need to talk about Kyler Murray. I don't know anything about his health, but I just feel like since he landed on that shoulder against the Seahawks, things have been a bit different. Over the first 9 games, guys, he averaged just under 70 yards a game on the ground, scoring 10 touchdowns. Over the last few weeks, he's averaged just 23. He hasn't scored a touchdown, posting a season-low 107 passing yards last week as well. I'm not as comfortable with him as I was the first half of the season. I trust the floor with Rodgers, especially this week. He's got the Eagles. Multiple touchdowns. That's his floor, right? Maybe even 3 touchdowns. He's scored, guys, 3 or more in each of the last 6 games. The consistency, Alan Lazard being back helps. All of it's great. He's on fire, and I like the matchup better. I'm going to go Aaron Rodgers over Kyler Murray. Tough matchup for Kyler, too, against the Rams, who want to get off the mat.
All right, Kay, I got one for you.
Yeah.
Comes from Marty. Marty. Same game here. We got Falcons versus Saints. He wants to know Taysom or Matthew Ice from Marty Zavika. What do you think?
I just remember Cam being on our show once, Cam Jordan, and saying that he loves... I think we asked him, who his favorite quarterback is, and he said Matt Ryan, and we were like, what? And he's like, he makes me look good. And he made the Saints look really good the first time they played each other. It's why I can't trust Matt Ryan. Out of all quarterbacks in the National Football League that week, the first time that they played the Saints, he scored the fewest fantasy points, putting up just 5. I don't see why that would change this week. I know Taysom Hill might be a little more dangerous, but because of the matchup, I'm not saying he's going to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback this week, but he will do damage on the ground to balance it out. He scored 2 rushing touchdowns in both starts so far. I just trust Sean Payton and how he's going to use him. I trust the Saints defense to give Matt Ryan fits, and that's why I cannot go with Ryan against the number 1 defense in the National Football League, the New Orleans Saints. I got to go Taysom over Matt Ryan.
Okay, all right. And finally, we have a tweet from J.A. Benoit, or is it Benoit?
I think Benoit.
Benoit.
French.
Oh, yeah, but Benoit Benjamin is spelled...
But David Benoit.
Can you say these 2 names in a French accent?
You're right, all right. Well, who asked, is it Raheem Mostert or Mostert? I don't know, I can't...
Mostert?
Yeah, is it Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Helaire?
I do not.
Okay, is it Mostert or Helaire? What do you think?
Mostert or Helaire. Okay, well, Edwards-Helaire has been an absolute fantasy headache this season, just because there are so many mouths to feed. Maybe he'll have a bigger role next year. It just doesn't seem to be happening. I cannot trust him. Some weeks he's just not in the game plan. It's just how it is. Mostert's going to be featured when he's out there. Guys, he's averaging just under 100 total yards a game, which is incredible in his 5 games this season. He has 3 touchdowns, and I like the matchup, guys, against the Bills. You can absolutely run on Buffalo. They're top 10 most generous to running backs this season. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, high-scoring offense, thought he would be a thing. And I'm not saying he won't be, but he's a little dicey from a fantasy perspective, especially in such a big, big week here in Week 13. Okay, I have one for you guys.
All right, okay.
So Peter brought up the Little Giants earlier in the show, so I just have to ask you, Which Guy Wednesday, better comedian, Rick Moranis or his rival coach of Married with Children fame, Ed O'Neill? I won't even say comedian, just who do you love?
Who you got?
Who you got?
I'm going O'Neill. First of all, Youngstown, Ohio, just a badass town. I love that. But then you add in, obviously, Married with Children. Then you add in the Blue Chips as the reporter.
Oh, talk about it.
Pressing Coach Pete Bell. I'm going Ed O'Neill big on this one.
I love that you don't
I'm not even
Modern
talking
Family.
Modern Family.
Of course you're not.
Going
Film.
I like him
love
as
you.
the bartender in Wayne's World.
Also great. Also great.
And yet, my heart is with Moranis. And maybe it's a sentimental one because we don't have Rick Moranis in the spotlight right now. And Ed O'Neill's great. I love him. But you telling me you could beat Dark Helmet and Spaceballs? Can you really beat that? Can you beat Louis Tully in Ghostbusters? Those are great tour de force comedic performances. It's not even that dry, sarcastic Ed O'Neill thing, which I love. he's performing. He's doing characters. He's amazing. Look, Al Bundy taught me about how things work between a husband and a wife when I was a little kid, and he's going upstairs with Peg, and he says, Peg, let me get the wild turkey. I'll be right with you. It was great. I love it. But I got to go Rick Moranis. I love it.
That's just it, though. Like, we were too young to enjoy Married with Children. Every joke was like, we were just there to look at Kelly and Pam, Peg. But now, as a married man,
Or Bud.
Bud was the homie. They just tore Bud up.
Stan Gable was next door.
But like now, as a
you
married
can't even
man,
say
how relevant is Married with Children?
I feel like it's actually
It's not relevant.
very problematic, probably, I would imagine, right? You tell me. I don't know if it would
My
even
house
work.
feels like more like Everybody Loves Raymond.
I mean, they literally had a T-shirt that said "No, ma'am," and they had a club where women weren't allowed.
No women club.
Oh, his
You don't
jokes as the
remember
shoe
this?
salesman?
You don't remember this?
Yeah, just like straight up a fat joke.
So you're going, are you going Ed O'Neill?
I'm going Ed O'Neill. Yeah, he's a legend, man. He's a
Did Ed
legend.
O'Neill swim in a teaspoon of Cheerios
true.
and milk? I mean, that
Honey, I Shrunk
like
the Kids.
blew my mind when I was little.
Ed O'Neill was typecasted because of Married with Children and still ended up being in movies outside of that Al Bundy
Modern
character.
Family, huge show.
Legend at Poke
The
High,
Blue
man.
Chips poll was great.
Yeah.
That's a great.
Will Selva, who you
Bag
got,
full of money.
Moranis or O'Neill? Ravens Steelers in Pittsburgh. That's hours away. We got you covered right here on NFL Network. This is Good Morning Football presented by Intuit QuickBooks. It is Wednesday, and yes, it is game day. There are lots of football going on. Kay Adams here, Nate Burleson, Peter Schrager, and Kyle Brandt. Let's get right to it, bringing in Ian Rappaport to kick off the hour at Rap Sheet. Let's do it, Ian. Hours away from kickoff. We're very excited about this one. It's sort of weird, but we are embracing it for what it is. Is there anything that the league is monitoring with the Ravens and the Steelers until then? This is the third postponement of this epic matchup.
Oh, it's very weird. It's 2020. Everything is weird. But yes, the league and the NFLPA are still waiting for the point-of-care coronavirus tests for both teams. Those are going to be administered this morning. Actually are ongoing as we speak. And assuming those are negative, which we can't assume anything in 2020, the game will go on at 3:40 p.m., a very rare 3:40 p.m. kickoff. Obviously got to get it in before the Rockefeller Center tree lighting, which is going to air on the NBC affiliate. It's very important later today. But there still are several issues to work out before the actual game begins. First of all, okay, the Baltimore Ravens learned right as they were taking off yesterday that a little-used reserve player had tested positive for COVID-19 as well as a staffer. But this was not deemed by the NFL and the NFLPA as a risk because this person was initially ID'd as someone who was at risk, and although he did take part in the walkthrough, it was socially distanced, everyone was wearing a mask, and they do not believe that it risked the health of his teammates. That is one issue. The other thing we're waiting on, who's actually going to be activated by the Baltimore Ravens off of the COVID-19 reserve list. The two most notable names today that could be activated, J.K. Dobbins, our starting running back, and Mark Ingram. But it is no sure thing, even though they're eligible, no sure thing that either of these guys gets activated. They have been sick. They've had a virus. They haven't been able to practice. Yes, it is 10 days, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they will play today. So still a lot of things to work out before 3:40.
I just hope we see RG3 throwing to Des Bryant, who's active on the 53-man roster, could be playing, could score a touchdown today, who knows, against this Steelers defense. What a wild season, what a wild day. It's a huge AFC North matchup. We thank you so much. Ian, I know you'll be here on NFL Network leading up to that this afternoon. It's also just a huge game for the playoff picture. Everybody should be watching this for that alone. The Steelers, they want to keep the 1 seed and the bye, of course. Very important this year. Meanwhile, the Ravens are trying to punch their ticket to the postseason in general here. Yesterday on the show, we looked back at our preseason prediction, guys. We gave you a mulligan. One thing you could change. Kyle, I was very interested in your choice to change and put in the Ravens. You put them in to make the playoffs.
It was a tough choice. We talk about this a lot, that we go back and make our picks in preseason, and I got shelled for this one, and I got torn apart for this one. I've never been torn apart for a pick like I was back in August of leaving the Ravens out of the playoffs, because last year they were one of the best stories in the league. And yet here we are, and we're at this precipice in the last month of the season, and they're 6-4, and they're going to play the weirdest game ever today. I don't believe they're going to win this game. I don't, just because of the Lamar and all the stuff that Ian is talking about. But then you just look at those last 4 or 5 weeks, and the schedule is supple as hell. I see the Cowboys, I see the Bengals, I see the Jaguars, And I still see the Ravens. I still see John Harbaugh. I still see some of their excellent players. And when you just look at them, if you can erase the last couple of months and just be like, God, it's been a weird season. They played really bad football and inconsistent, sloppy. I still have faith in it. I can't shake the faith in this last month. And really, it has a lot to do more, I think, with John Harbaugh than Lamar Jackson. I still think he's a top 5 coach in the league. I think this is his greatest challenge. I think we're seeing the cream rise to the top right now with coaches. And when I see the schedule and I see the talent after this week, never mind this week, I have no idea what's going to happen today. I don't think the Ravens are going to win. I still think they're going to turn the corner in the last month. Maybe it's blind faith, but I think it's more in their head coach.
Yeah, this is a huge question mark surrounding this squad right now, especially given the circumstances of this week and this game today. I have faith in the Ravens for the simple fact that I felt like I haven't seen the best of Lamar Jackson. And I really don't know how long I'm going to be waiting, because it's almost like, we've had these games this year where he showed us glimpses. Where, okay, pass the ball well, runs the ball well, but he hasn't necessarily put that together week in and week out. And I hate to say it, but could this be the point that we all feared, where teams are figuring out the offense, figuring out Lamar, figuring out not just how to stop him, because you can't necessarily stop him, but how to keep him under wraps? So as much as I want to say optimistically, because that's Nate, he loves everything and everybody's going to turn around, you still got time, I just don't see it, because I can't apply the November, December is who you are, and this is who you will be in January for teams that are playing well.
Right.
If I don't apply that right now to a team that's struggling.
That's fair.
So I feel like the Baltimore Ravens are exactly who they will be in the playoffs, a team still trying to find their identity.
Today, okay, I mean, spoiler alert, I think it's going to be an absolute blowout tonight, or today. I think the Steelers just wiped the floor with them, all right? And then we're at 6-6, and it's like, what are we going to be the rest of the season? Honestly, I think it's going to be one of those
Why?
games.
I don't think so.
I think this is like Broncos-Saints, honestly.
Why?
Honestly, because they haven't practiced in person in 10 days, and because as of Sunday they had 22 people with COVID, and not people who had close contact tracing. 22 people in the organization had COVID-19, tested positively, weren't allowed near anybody. You have no Judon, you have no Brandon Williams, you have no Lamar Jackson, you have no Willie Snead, you have no Pat Ricard, you have no Screwed. Like, I think it's a wipeout tonight, today. But then I look at the final month, and I'm like, what are you going to be? Like, what are you going to do now? Because you're now 6-6. You're not the darling. You're not everybody's team. What are you going to be? You said it. They play the Cowboys. They play the Jaguars. They play the Bengals. There's wins out there. This is a wide open AFC wildcard thing. There are 3 wildcard spots now. You were gifted that as well this season. There is a way in this thing. But there's them who were the 1 seed last year. And also I'm going to look at the NFC, the 49ers, who were just dealt this news that they're not allowed to live at home over the next 5 weeks. They're going to be living in hotels in quarantine in Arizona and have to go and make this run. And like, Kyle, this is where coaching comes into play. John Harbaugh was the NFL's Coach of the Year last year because they went 14-2. If John Harbaugh can take this team from 6-6 after today's loss, and yes, they will lose this game. If he can take them from 6-6 to somehow to the playoffs after what they've been through over the past 2 weeks, and I know Steelers fans are like, oh my, no, this is their fault. No. This is true adversity. This isn't, well, we faced a good defense and we were 9-7 last year, but we're 14. This is true. If Harbaugh and Shanahan can find a way to get these teams into the playoffs, that's Coach of the Year stuff for me. I don't think we can even make a point enough about what the Ravens are like, the indecision and the confusion. Like, they boarded planes yesterday in Baltimore, and I was getting texts from people in the organization being like, is there a game tomorrow? Do you know? You work for the NFL Network. Do you know?
They might not know right now.
They don't know right now if there's a game, and then they're going to go play the #1 team in the league. What's the line in Rocky IV? It's a...
If I can change, you can change.
No, that's a great one, but it's a washout in Moscow.
Oh, it's a gutter war, no holds barred in Moscow.
Yeah, it's going to be that, and it's not going to be pretty for the Ravens.
You mentioned the rest of the season, though. So the only team that they play the rest of the way with a winning record is the Browns. I'd ask you this, Nate. It's the Cowboys, the Jags. They have a game against the Giants you like a lot, and the Bengals. Is this manageable?
Yeah, for sure. Listen, coaching is going to come into play. They can definitely make a run here at the end of the season. But say the coach does a great job, and Harbaugh gets these guys motivated, and they start to stack up wins. Do they have an identity? Does that mean you know who you are once the playoff hits? Because I know when it comes to, just look at their division alone. The Steelers know exactly who they are. They're a strong team with a great balance. Led by the Browns know exactly who they are.
Yeah.
So I don't know who tell me who they are. Are they a team led by Lamar Jackson, who was the best player in the NFL like last year?
They're not healthy, I can tell you that.
I don't believe they are.
It's important, too, to look at context. They're not catching the Steelers. That's a wrap. to get in the playoffs, their real opponents are the Raiders,
Yep.
the Dolphins. Like, if you're to line up the John Harbaugh Ravens and the Raiders and the Dolphins,
I think
who do you trust?
I trust the Ravens, I think, especially with
That's what
that
I'm saying.
schedule I'm talking about.
After what happened
That
with the
Browns
Raiders
game.
last week, it's tough. The Dolphins, I
Never
guess
been
they're going to
there.
go with Fitzpatrick.
Never been
They've
there.
never been there.
I kind of like the Dolphins.
If you line up those three, you like the Dolphins?
More than
You like
Lamar
Fitz?
Jackson and the really and Harbaugh.
I saw a guy in Ryan Fitzpatrick who was going out there playing fearless in a team that can play on all three levels. We're talking offense, defense, and special teams. I'm just not sure what I'm getting out of the Baltimore Ravens. And it's been like that all season long.
I hear you.
At least Ryan Fitzpatrick knows who he is and knows
Flores
how
does too, I think.
he thrives within that offense. I still feel like there's this huge question mark of who the Baltimore Ravens are.
I still question the Browns. I mean, it's fair to do that. They beat up on the Jaguars. They beat up on some other team, Washington.
And help who you play, Schrager.
I understand that, but I mean, their 8-3 is awesome, and they have been so good, and Stefanski could be the coach of the year, but Browns play the Ravens in late December.
They do.
Are we sure we're taking the Browns?
I think
because
I'm
of their
taking the
record? I might
Ravens.
take the Ravens because if they've been there, done that. And 2 years ago, when they had to play in a Week 17 game, winning in, it was like the Ravens are like, all right, we're the Ravens, you're the Browns, we're going to beat you.
the Ravens killed them week one.
That's some institutional knowledge.
You're right,
there.
you're right.
That's like